Okay, good morning, Year 7. I hope you all had a lovely half term, that you enjoyed the weather, that you just had a really nice time with your families and so on. And I hope you're ready to get back to some work now, please. So, starting off, remember you can pause the video whenever you want to. Starting off, let's write the date, title, and your learning objective down on your book or your pieces of paper, whatever you're writing on. Okay, so your learning objective today is following on from the lesson that we did before half term when I set you that My Maths task to see what you did know. And actually I was very impressed. A lot of you knew a lot about converting between fractions, decimals and percentages. So that was really encouraging to see. So we're just going to continue with that for this lesson and then we'll move on from there. So, our learning objective is to understand the equivalence. That means that things are equal between a fraction, decimal, and a percentage. So we know that we can write a number as a fraction, as a decimal, and as a percentage, and they all are equal. It's just different ways of writing it. So pause the video, make sure you've got that down, you've underlined the things that need to be underlined, and be ready to move on, please. So here's your first example. I'd like you to write that down, copy it down into your books, pause the video to sort yourselves out and get that down. So what is 40% as A, a fraction, B, a decimal? So 40% as a decimal, and then, so 40% as a fraction and then as a decimal. So if we write 40%, we know that 40% means per cent, means per 100. Cent means 100, like century means 100 years. So 40% means 40 per 100. And the way that we would write that is 40 per 100. So that's 40% as a fraction. Now we wouldn't leave it like that, because we know that we can simplify this. We can divide both of them by 10 and we get 4/10. And then we can divide both of them by 2 and we get 2/5. And that's what 40% is as a fraction. It's actually 2/5. Now let's think about what it is as a decimal. A decimal. So a decimal, we need a decimal point in there somewhere. And we know that 40% is going to be less than 1 as a decimal. Anything 100% and over is going to be 1 point something or 2 point something or whatever. Anything less than 100% is going to be less than 1. So it's going to be between 0 and 1. Now, how we go from percentage to decimal is we divide by 100. So everything moves right 2 places. So what's 40 divided by 100? Is 0.4. So 40% as a decimal is 0.4 and as a fraction is 2/5. And that was part B there. So make sure you've got that working out down. Okay, I'll just split it kind of into 2 so you can see where the line goes from A to B. Get that down in your books and we'll go on to another example. Example number 2 was 0.1 as a percentage and then as a fraction. So let's have a look. Remember, pause the video, write this down. This is example number 2. Part A, 0.1 is a decimal. Now to go from decimal to percentage, we go the other way round. We have to multiply by 100. Okay? So decimal to percentage, we multiply by 100. So 0.1 multiplied by 100 is 10. And we can't forget the percent. Okay, mustn't forget the percent. What's 0.1 as a fraction then? So if we know it's 10%, if we know it's 10% as a percentage, remember 10% means 10 per 100. So 10 per 100. It's 10 over 100, and if we simplify that by dividing them both over 10, we get 1/10. So 0.1 is 1/10, just like 0.2 is 2/10, 0.3 is 3/10, 0.4 is 4/10, and so on. But I'm just showing you the way that we could get there using some working out. So always remember to go from decimal to percentage, multiply by 100. To go from percentage to decimal, you divide by 100, so other way round. Oh, okay. And always remember percent means per 100, and that's how you write it down. Now we've got one last example to do here. Write 1/5 as a percentage and then as a decimal. Okay, got two things to do there. So write that down and we'll get going with part A. So as a percentage, remember it's percent, per 100. So we need to get 1/5 to be something over 100. We need to find an equivalent fraction. What do I times 5 by to get 100? I times it by 20. So I have to do the same to the top to find my equivalent fraction. 1 times 20, 20. So 20 over 100, that means 20 per 100, 20%. So our answer is 20%. Okay, that's what 1/5 is as a percentage. You must write it as a decimal over as a fraction over 100, first, and then you can change it to a percentage. Let's have a look at part B. Now we know 1/5 is 20% after finding the percentage first. Well, we divide by 100 to get it as a decimal, which is 0.2. Which is right, because we know 0.2 is 2/10, don't we? Which if we simplify, is 1/5. So we know that's right. So our answer is 0.2 for the decimal and 20% for the percentage. Okay, remember decimals, they don't have percentages next to them. It's only percentages that have the percent symbol. So don't, by accident, write a percent sign next to your decimal in your answer. Okay, let's have a look at these. So few notes here for you to write down. This is something that you can put in that nice highlighted bubble or in that box that we draw usually. Okay, so number 1, to go from percentage to decimal, you divide by 100. To go from decimal to percentage, you times by 100. And to go from a fraction to a decimal or percentage, you need to write it as a fraction over 100 first. Let me show you again. So say I had the fraction 4/20. I would want to write this, to get as a percentage or a decimal, I would want to write it as a fraction over 100 first. So I'd need to find my equivalent fraction. 20 times by 5 gives me 100, so I need to times by 5 at the top. 4 times 5 is 20, so that's going to be 20% or 0.2, depending on whether you want it as a percentage or as a decimal. So there's another little example of how that could work. You must write it as a fraction over 100, an equivalent fraction over 100 first. So let's look at the questions I'd like you to do. So I've got 3 questions from exercise 11A from your textbooks to do. Look at this sign up here, no calculator, thank you very much. Question 1, fractions to percentages. Question 2, decimals to percentages. And then question 3, percentages as fractions. Okay, you should all be able to have a good go at this. So altogether you've got 15 questions really to do there. So once you've done those, as usual, please submit a picture of your work or email it to me, whichever works for you, as usual, as soon as you've completed it. Any problems, just ask me and I'll explain any of those questions to you. As you know, I usually get back to you very, very quickly, so don't just sit there being stuck. Please ask for help. What I'll do is I will ignore that, answers to be posted later. That was for another class, don't worry about that. Answers are attached on the PDF that I usually upload, so you can do the questions first and then check your answers afterwards. Please mark your work before you send it to me. Otherwise, I have to go through and look and see if you've got it right when actually I've given you the answers to mark your work with. Okay? Okay, I hope that's straightforward, Year 7, and I look forward to seeing your work, as I haven't seen it in a while. I do look forward to it, and I hope you're all well and safe.